Hello, stranger. I have exceedingly kind viewers. Not all of you, of course, some of you hate me, but a lot of you gas me up. Like, a lot. I think I've gotten more impassioned affirmations from YouTube comments than I've gotten from most of my friends, family, and even romantic partners. Which is nice, but it's also confusing. Like, why are you being so kind to me? Who am I to you? What are we? So I feel obligated to make sure we're on the same page. And to be clear, you only sort of know me, and I definitely don't know you. I make videos on the internet, and you watch them. Not exactly a friendship. By the way, you look great today. Well, you look great every day. No, really, see for yourself. So this is what I see. This broad demographic data is about the extent of what I know about you. You could be anywhere in the world, any gender, and you're probably Gen Z, maybe late millennial. I have no idea what you look like. From what I'm given, if I want to see you, all I can really do is picture you as a young, nameless, amorphous, achromatic, ambiguously gendered, disembodied spirit, which is coincidentally how I see myself sometimes. To me, you are a mysterious spectral figure behind the camera. I project you there in the room, watching me, like the imaginary friend I had as a kid who I eventually had to leave behind and can no longer find. Do I seem genuine to you? Authentic? Wrong, my dear apparition. I'm actually delusional. I convince myself I'm talking to an actual person. And if you like me too much, you're also delusional. We're in the same boat. A ship. A relationship. So, what are we exactly? Now, you probably already know this, but the term parasocial describes a person's one-sided connection with someone they don't have a regular social relationship with. A live streamer who doesn't really know you, a chatbot who's not really a person, or a fictional character from a story you like. They're not really your friends, but it can certainly feel like it. The term was coined in 1956, but what it describes has been around forever. Engaging with basically any form of media that features a person or otherwise personifiable object is one-sided or parasocial. However, a simple parasocial interaction, like watching a YouTube video or reading a book, is not the same as a full-fledged parasocial relationship. I've seen people propose a sort of spectrum, casual fandom on one end, celebrity worship on the other, and parasocial relationships fall somewhere in between. At some point it becomes unhealthy, maybe at this point, or maybe around here. Admittedly, I toe the line myself sometimes. I happen to care a lot about fictional characters. I even get them tattooed. I've bought merch, I've gotten book signed, I've sent fan mail, I even awkwardly asked for photos. But I'd say most people are on the well-adjusted end, yourself included. You wouldn't really be watching this otherwise. You'd be watching the same music video for the 110th time on 3 different devices or something. But to be clear, there's nothing inherently wrong with parasocial relationships. They can genuinely enrich your life. Take Miss Rachel, for example. She's a baby YouTuber, and her audience, babies, are completely clueless. They can't tell the difference between social and parasocial. They're comforted by her voice because they recognize her as a friend. It's a parasocial relationship. But this is all fine and good because Miss Rachel can still help them learn and develop and grow up to be empathetic individuals, even if they don't really know each other. However, it seems that the term parasocial carries a very negative connotation on the internet nowadays. You'll see people accuse each other of being parasocial or preface praise with not to be parasocial or anything. Further, people seem to think that parasocial relationships are getting worse somehow, that they've gotten out of hand, that they've reached the point where we need to talk about it and even make gratuitously long video essays about it. But before we continue, what is a video? In 1878, the first moving picture, The Horse in Motion, was created. People love to point fingers at each other in the anti-parasocial discourse. People have specifically ridiculed fangirls throughout history. Accordingly, fangirl is often used as a pejorative, or alternatively we hear accusations of glazing or meat munching or dick riding or whatever. Being parasocial is girlish or childish or god forbid gay, except when I do it. And when it's not those labels, it's nerds or geeks or weebs or Koreaboos or Potterheads or Disney adults or whatever disagreeable fandom slips into your feed that day. Those people are crazy parasocial. Not me though. Not to be that one friend who's too woke or whatever, because we're not friends. But I don't think we should be so chauvinistic. Again, parasocial relationships have been around forever and they affect everyone. So you can't really single out specific demographics. Well, except one. What unites all the troublesome parasocials is unemployment. My potentially hot take is that I don't think parasocial affection, even at the extremes, is an inherently bad thing. It really depends on the details. So an immediate adverse reaction to seeing affection, parasocial or otherwise, is oftentimes just a proxy for a deeper antagonism. If you already dislike someone, it's really easy to hate on their parasocial behavior too. It's low-hanging fruit since everyone does it, and it's easy to point out in other people, especially if you already have an agenda. Again, a clear example of this is the fangirl. Society already belittles the interests of young girls in bad faith, so it's not surprising that their parasocial behavior is also uniquely criticized, even pathologized. Think Beatlemania and Bieber fever, literally sicknesses in name. And later diagnoses of rabid Twilight fans and crazy One Direction fans or delusional BTS fans and so on. Needless to say, it's not just girls who get alarmingly parasocial. Anyone can be parasocial, but it's only some people that are treated as carriers of some endemic disease of fanaticism. More broadly speaking, I think a lot of anti-parasocial sentiment is rooted in a broader distaste for things that aren't considered traditional or mature or masculine or otherwise normal. And so we should be careful not to just focus on parasocial behavior that makes us cringe. Cringe is not necessarily a bad thing, it just means something makes you uncomfortable. And that might just be a you problem. It takes another step to argue why it should make everyone uncomfortable, and chances are you probably exhibit some cringe parasocial behavior yourself. I think this Twitter thread I came across illustrates my point pretty well. This guy and thousands of others think that it's unfitting, unsightly even, for this adult woman to care so much about a Twitch streamer's success. And the replies are some self-aware guys who recognize that standing basketball players is essentially the same thing. Bias, fave, kin, OTP, GOAT, are they really so different? In any case, you're fanning over someone who doesn't know you and probably doesn't need your compassion. Which is fine, just don't be hypocritical about it. I found another example while I was editing. The K-pop idol Hisung recently left the boy group ENHYPEN, which is a pretty big deal if you're into K-pop. Many fans didn't take the news very well and even took to protesting on the streets of various cities around the world. I've heard many analogies for Hisung going solo, like Zayn leaving One Direction. And personally, I think it's like how Luka Doncic, star basketball player for the Dallas Mavericks, was traded to the LA Lakers out of nowhere last year, which was a pretty big deal if you're into basketball. Similarly, many Mavericks fans were quite upset by this, and they also took to the streets to protest. As someone who is fairly invested in both K-pop and basketball, I'd say the two events are comparably parasocial, and if you disagree with one group on the grounds of them being parasocial, I think you should probably disagree with the other too. Personally, I do think the protests are a bit much and perhaps out of touch, politically speaking. But to be fair, these fans might also be politically active. I mean, at least they know how to organize. Anywho, back to the video. An actually compelling criticism of some parasocial behavior requires identifying who, if anyone, is being hurt and how, not just stopping at superficial details like age and gender. I also have a more contentious example. Now consider pop concerts and VTuber concerts. Now your initial reaction might be to cringe at the latter. Admittedly, I had this initial instinct as well. But now I'm a bit of a VTuber ally, in addition to being a furry ally, which is admittedly even more contentious. But I'm afraid it's still true. Inside me there are two wolves, and they're both kawaii and making out. But for real, what's really different here besides appearances and demographics? These are performers, and these are excited, parasocial fans. It really comes down to taste. And don't get me wrong, anyone is free to question another person's taste. That's like my favorite hobby. But it'd be hard to argue that one is inherently worse, morally or medically speaking, due to its uniquely parasocial nature. They're both parasocial. They just look different. Of course, you can still disagree with this sort of behavior as a whole, but you shouldn't be chauvinistic and try to single out a specific group just because you don't like them. And I am especially against the notion that parasocial relationships are indicative of some mental deficiency or further a mental illness. That term shouldn't be used so lightly, in my opinion, as a lazy way to discredit people you find off-putting. We can certainly do better than that. I recently went to an anime convention for the first time. Mind you, I was there as a vendor, helping out with my sibling's shop, which you should check out, by the way. BeInThreads.store discount code ARPY. I was mostly working, but I did have time to look around, and it was really interesting. I saw lots of art, dance parties, a cat cafe, a Beyblade tournament, cosplayers, voice actors, VTubers, meet and greets, strangers being friendly. It was wholesome. Communities that are, generally speaking, outside mainstream society, gathering and having fun. Granted, anime has become very popular as of late and is basically a part of pop culture by now, but you still get some eyebrow raises if you seem too into it. So, it was cool to see a space for all that. I enjoyed it, didn't even smell bad. Side note, I came in thinking I was really out of my element, but I ended up getting second place at the community Kahoot. Make of that what you will. Anyways, fan conventions, or cons, are unique in that the whole point is to be a fan. It's inherently parasocial. You attend because you're invested in characters or people who either don't exist or don't know you. And this one was centered on anime, but there are also cons for YouTube, Twitch, K-pop, fantasy, sci-fi, comics, etc. So the convention got me wondering, what's so bad about the parasocial? Cons are like grand yearly parasocial festivals. They're among the most parasocial events you can attend. But it didn't look harmful to me. People were enjoying themselves. And one of my takeaways was that many fandoms are just as much about making community as they are about fanning over media. It can be a great way to meet new people and make friends or strengthen existing friendships. And if you graduate from the fandom, move on in some other direction, you can take those friends with you, or at least some fond memories of actual human connection. The thing is, parasocial almost seems like a profanity on the internet nowadays. But from my own recent observations, there are benefits to parasocial relationships even at the seemingly extreme. Now, you may be wondering, was this section just a long-winded way for me to try to defend my growing weep-like tendencies? Yada yada. Yes. Did it work?
I can't even like the one. It's more legendary than the Kevin Durant. That's what we talking about right now. Stop talking about he's this guy. He's not that guy. He's a Slim Reaper. He's garbage when it matters. He's garbage.
I haven't yet distinguished negative parasocial behavior, and so I'll do that now. Disliking someone like an enemy is also a sort of relationship. And if that person doesn't know you, that's a parasocial relationship too. Now, I don't consider this sort of parasocial relationship to be inherently bad either. I hate a number of people who don't know me, and I actively prey on their downfall. But I won't be convinced I'm wrong in doing so just because it's parasocial. However, parasocially hating on someone can be wrong for other reasons. There are some distasteful genres of content on the internet that are fueled by parasocial hatred. Take lolcows for example, people who for whatever reason can be easily milked for laughs. They may not have fans, but they can have a lot of viewers. And pretty often, these lolcow viewers are just eager to put someone down, and they'll latch onto any sufficiently disagreeable and also usually marginalized person to do so. Better yet if the figure has done something wrong, so that they have a green light to bully them. Obsessively hating a stranger on the internet is just as parasocial as being a dedicated fan. But the problem isn't that they're being parasocial per se, it's that they're so oddly eager to sustain their resentful hobby. There's also internet drama and gossip and baseless rumors and slandering and such, which are a lot like their real-life counterparts. And drama and gossip have a way of attracting a bad and very loud crowd. Hateful and prejudiced people like misogynists or racists or homophobes and such will jump at any opportunity to drag a stranger's name through the mud to push their own agenda. These people aren't losers because they're parasocial, they're losers for entirely different and more significant reasons. And accusing them of being parasocial may be correct, but it's only scratching the tip of the iceberg, I think. In real life, for example, invasive misogynistic gossip isn't wrong because it's social behavior. It's wrong because it's invasive misogynistic gossip. And on the internet, invasive misogynistic gossip isn't wrong because it's parasocial behavior. It's wrong because it's invasive misogynistic gossip. Parasocial isn't synonymous with any of those things. My point is that even in toxic negative parasocial relationships, being parasocial itself is not the primary issue, and treating it as such may distract us from what really makes a person wrongfully hateful. Okay, now back to positive parasocial relationships driven by affection and not hate, and how those can go wrong too. Now, I don't claim to be a relationship expert or anything, but for years I've been part of thousands of simultaneous, non-exclusive, open relationships in a sort of social network, if you know what I mean. I used to live in Portland. Relationships, including parasocial ones, can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. What works for some people may not work for others. But a common problem in any relationship, including parasocial ones, is greed. I consider Archive of Our Own, or AO3, to be the peak of parasocial culture. It's a completely free, non-profit fanfiction platform that's run entirely on donations and volunteers. There's not even ads. The writers aren't paid, but they do it for a love of the game. Greed isn't an issue because there are no incentives for exploitation. You can certainly spend too much time on there, but at least no one's profiting off of your borderline addiction. AO3 is a truly exemplary outlet for parasocial affection, in my opinion. There are, however, less admirable ways to handle parasocial affection, namely monetizing it. Not necessarily wrong, mind you, but more likely to be harmful. Emotional attachments give companies a lot of leverage to work with. In the music industry, for example, there's a tier of products that people would only really pay for if they had a strong parasocial relationship with an artist. Particularly dedicated fans may excessively stream and buy records just to inflate the numbers for their favorite artist. Some music labels even use parasocial affection to coax fans into gambling via gacha mechanics. For example, K-pop albums often include random photo cards and raffle tickets for meet and greets. It's not uncommon for fans to buy dozens or even hundreds of the same album to get specific photo cards or better odds to meet the idols, producing a lot of waste, but also showing that it's become less about the music and more about the affection. But for most artists, it's hard to argue that they explicitly encourage extreme parasocial affection. There is plausible deniability, but they're certainly not eager to discourage it since it gets them paid. It may even feel like a contractual obligation to maintain the fan base's delusions. There are incentives for fostering intense parasocial relationships. It's lucrative to create superfans since superfans spend the most money. The same incentives exist for smaller artists and creators too, myself included. On an unrelated note, I just started a Patreon page, which you should totally check out. patreon.com/rbpark. We all have to pay rent, and it can be difficult to make money doing this stuff, so how can we supplement our income? Well, one option is to monetize parasocial affection by, for example, selling proximity to ourselves. We can offer increasing levels of intimacy with increasing prices. Now, this isn't always done explicitly or even intentionally. It's usually an unspoken bonus attached to more tangible products. You can buy merchandise, see exclusive content, enjoy ad-free viewing or subscriber-only chatting, and so on. But often underlying these transactions is an implicit desire to feel closer to the creator, or at least a desire to recognizably support someone you're fond of, parasocially. To be clear, I think this is all still fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. People can spend their money and emotional resources however they'd like. Again, parasocial relationships, like real relationships, can be very diverse. And what really matters is not how it looks, but whether it hurts anyone. And the truth is, a tier 3 Twitch sub might actually be doing very well in their life. A dedicated Twitter stan might actually have a very adequate social life. Do I personally think there are better ways to spend time and money? Yeah, probably, but I spend an even worse way, so who am I to talk? There are a lot of people out there with a lot of disposable income and/or free time. There are also a lot of parasocial butterflies out there with an abundance of affection to give. And honestly, I kind of admire that. However, it does become a problem when people give more than they can afford to. If you become financially irresponsible, if you become a shut-in and neglect the other relationships in your life, or if you're already lacking a support system and excessive parasocial behavior is only holding you back further. You're losing a lot to gain very little. It takes intentional effort to sustain a healthy relationship, even if it's a parasocial one, and there can be willful ignorance on both sides. It can be easy for someone to get a bit too invested, and it can also be easy for the receiving party to just let it slide. And so a fan should be careful to keep their feelings in check, and the recipient should be careful when playing with fire. After all, feelings are not toys, they have actual consequences, and everyone can get burnt. At the end of the day, parasocial relationships should be a luxury and not a necessity. And they're great when they come from a place of abundance, but not so great when they come from a place of desperation. You should never feel obligated to pay celebrities or content creators to feel valued. Unless it's me on my Patreon. I'll be your friend. Hire me. Back in college, I worked as a speaking tutor. I guess I just love yapping that much. Anyways, it was free tutoring for any student since I was paid by the school itself. And so I got a lot of visitors over the years. And actually, most of them came in already knowing me from the internet since I was a vlogger at their school. They'd usually mention it at the very end of a session as they were leaving. However, there were a few times where people came in with the express purpose of having a conversation with me, not at all to get tutored. They come in and briefly mention some homework before quickly dropping the guys entirely and just talking about their life and what they've been dealing with lately, with a lot of personal detail. Not the sort of conversation you'd have with a stranger, the sort of stuff you say to a friend. Now, this was not in the job description, and I certainly wasn't qualified to be their therapist, but I actually didn't mind it. I was really moved that they were able to be so vulnerable with me, and I was always able to relate to them. In hindsight, they probably knew I had similar struggles from my YouTube videos. Admittedly, I was pretty unfiltered online back then, so perhaps it invited a reciprocal intimacy. On paper, this sort of behavior is pretty parasocial, perhaps even crossing a boundary since I was sort of forced to be there. But luckily, I never felt harassed or uncomfortable. They just wanted to talk, and even if it bordered on trauma dumping at times, I was still getting paid. Patreon.com/rppark. And for the record, I actually do like talking to y'all in real life if you somehow manage to find me outside. It's nice to know what you're like. The spectral figure gets a bit more detail, and I have someone to think about when I'm alone, talking to the void. Now, my point with this anecdote, besides making things about myself, which I love doing, is that lonely people will use the means of relief that are readily available. And these students probably felt some sort of companionship from my YouTube videos. Then they saw that an upgrade was available. My tutoring shifts were free, private, face-to-face time with someone who could presumably understand and empathize with them, like a friend for hire. And so they used that service. Zooming out, the trajectory of the parasocial industry seems to be quickly approaching replacing actual relationships. They've become more and more like the real thing. Scholars now consider certain parasocial relationships, like those with live streamers, to no longer be one-sided. Rather, they're 1.5-sided with more reciprocity and intimacy. Throw yourself in deep enough and it can really start to feel like an actual relationship. Which brings us to perhaps the endgame of the parasocial industry, friends for sale. AI companionship is the latest hot product in the parasocial market. Friend.com is a very straightforward example. It's a startup that ran an advertising campaign in October that a lot of people reasonably disliked. The company spent most of its funding on its website domain and marketing. The product itself is quite simple. It's a Bluetooth microphone pendant that pings Google Gemini on your phone. It's just another GPT wrapper, but it's provocative in that it sells itself as something much more substantial. A friend. Actually, a best friend, or even a romantic partner. It was pitched as your closest confidant. Oh, and the terms and conditions include consenting to biometric data collection and waiving the right to jury trials, class actions, and court proceedings, which are of course the terms to my friendships too. This is a brazen attempt to profit off of people's loneliness while acting like they're saving the world, classic tech industry stuff. Clearly, this company and its investors are making a bet on a particular future. He probably saw this movie and thought, wow, he's just like me for real, I need to get in on this. They're explicitly trying to do what the entertainment industry had only hinted at, selling friendship. And they're not alone. There's already a budding industry for AI companionship. Character.ai, Replica, Grok now sells digital anime girlfriends for $300. Elon probably saw this movie and thought, wow, he's just like me for real, I need to get in on this. Also, I'm a Nazi. Lots of people already talk to chatbots every day, even fall in love with them. And considering that governments are actively working with AI companies, there's likely going to be little legislation to slow things down. However, as the graffiti over the advertisements will tell you, AI is not really your friend. Chatbots have already played a major role in several suicides, not to mention how AI weaponry literally kills people. AI is a broad category of computational tools that are essentially giant piles of linear algebra. Large language models, a type of AI, are text prediction machines, sophisticated autocomplete. They can be helpful for certain tasks for sure, but at the end of the day, they are not human beings. The only human-to-human relationship in using a chatbot is between the user and the shareholder, between buyer and seller. Do I think there are better ways to spend time and money? Again, yes. But like other parasocial relationships, I wouldn't consider it a pressing issue until it becomes a necessity. These services aren't cheap, they can even be financially debilitating, and they can hold you back from nurturing the real relationships in your life. We should never become dependent on parasocial relationships, be it with celebrities or influencers or fictional characters or now chatbots. Real love is not so conditional. There are no subscription fees. Unless you're paying child support, don't skip out on that. But most importantly, AI is now taking my job too. Please, you don't need to pay chatbots to be your friend. I'll be your friend. Pay me instead on patreon.com/rp.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!
Again, I am not against parasocial relationships. I have several that are very dear to me. And not to brag, but I happen to be the target demographic. Chronically online, isolated, and I already talk to imaginary people for validation, so best believe I eat that shit up. Parasocial has become a bit of a derogatory buzzword on the internet as of late. A quick and easy way to put down a fan or a group of fans you dislike, with a vague suggestion of scientific validation. But like with any new fancy multisyllabic word to enter your vocabulary, being able to name a phenomenon does not put you above it. We all partake, and I think this parasocial stuff is still mostly harmless. It's usually low-stakes leisure, and again, I've seen it bring genuine joy and community. But the thing is, parasocial relationships don't happen in a vacuum. They exist in the same setting as everything else, and so they are subject to the same hatred and greed that corrupt every other facet of our lives too. And unsurprisingly, the most vulnerable are those with the least. If you're already struggling financially or socially, falling deep into a parasocial relationship can quickly become a maladaptive coping mechanism and ultimately hold you back from a real healthy social life. Again, it's fine to use parasocial services. They've helped me at my lowest, and they can be a whole lot of fun. But they can't cure loneliness. They don't save people. At most, they sell water bottles in a forest fire. Relief? Sure, but salvation? Unlikely. The solution to widespread loneliness isn't more products and subscriptions. It's actual community between human beings. If you are currently neck deep in a parasocial relationship, I'd hope it's just for fun and not due to desperation. But if you are truly lonely, I suggest looking elsewhere. It doesn't even have to be offline. I've made friends online too, friends that actually know me back. Of course, it's much scarier to reach out to an actual person than to a parasocial figure. When it's not one-sided, it requires some vulnerability. You can get ignored or judged or otherwise hurt. But you could also foster something truly beautiful, and that's worth a shot. And if you really feel like paying someone, you could try therapy, which is now available on my Patreon. Just kidding, but actual healthcare can be helpful too. On the internet, we can be very quickly inflammatory towards people who are just trying to feel less alone. Of course, we should call out when fans are being toxic or even predatory, but when a fan is just alone and desperate, they're a victim. It can be helpful to point out when they're approaching delusion, but it's not helpful to be hostile and demeaning. Isolation has become the standard, and parasocial relationships have become the most readily available relief. Then if someone takes it too far, the real tragedy isn't that their behavior is weird or pathetic or cringe to you, it's that they feel the need for it in the first place. Now to make things about myself again, which never gets old, what's up with us? What's going on? I've spent years confused as to why y'all are so nice to me. Even my friends are like, wow, your viewers really like you. And so I've wondered, is this normal? Is this okay? Am I doing something wrong? Am I a part of the problem? Are you good? But maybe I've been overthinking it. I'm not trying to exploit your loneliness or anything. I just like attention. Then you might not even be lonely, and I'm not a very enticing parasocial partner anyways. Distant, unreliable, prone to ghosting for months to years at a time, behavior that couldn't sustain a serious relationship, parasocial or otherwise. So I think everything's fine actually. You're kind just because you're kind. Again, parasocial affection can come from a place of abundance. And maybe some of those many kind people out there stumbled onto my channel and don't mind supporting me in some way. And maybe that's okay, as long as it's not a necessity to you, just leisure. I ask that you support me for what I do and not what I am to you, parasocially speaking. And please save most of your compassion for your loved ones and the actual people in the actual world who actually need it, yourself included. Thanks for watching, you mysterious spectral figure behind the camera. And thanks for being kind, even though we don't really know each other. Take care of yourself, cherish community, and bye.